Welcome everybody to our National Reunification Month webinar. My name is Jennifer Marcelli. I am the Program Area Manager for Foster Care with the Capacity Building Center for States, and we're really excited to have you all on today, and we have some great presentations from some great folks today. So I just wanted to quickly go over the agenda for today. In a moment, I will introduce our presenters, and we'll talk about our objectives for the day. We will hear from a couple folks from the Children's Bureau about the vision and resources supporting reunification. And then we'll hear from St. A in Wisconsin about their attachment and biobehavioral catch-up for visitation. And then we'll hear from Sonoma County in California about parent partnerships. And then we'll have some time at the end for a question and answer session. So please feel free to enter your questions in the participant chat throughout the presentation, and we'll have time to get to those later in the presentation. So first we're going to hear a message from the Associate Commissioner of the Children's Bureau, Jerry Milner, and then we'll hear from our National Foster Care Specialist with the Children's Bureau, Taffy Compain. I'm Jennifer Marcelli, and then we'll hear from Jenny Keefe, who's the Family Preservation Program Manager with St. A. And then we'll hear from the Sonoma County, California team, Katie Luciani, Rose Eschi, Robin Robbins, and Jody Rogers. So with that, we are going to hear a message from Associate Commissioner Milner.
The month of June provides us with two opportunities for celebration in the child welfare world. We have Father's Day and we have the National Reunification Month. Both allow us the opportunity to reflect on the importance of families. Both also prompt us to redouble our efforts to strengthen families and to do everything we can as a system and in our communities to respect and nurture the integrity of the parent-child relationship. Reunification Month is a time to celebrate resiliency, hard work, and the power of families to heal. It's a time to acknowledge perseverance and to commit to seeking positive outcomes for families separated through foster care.
The Children's Bureau Vision Slide lists the following priorities: primary prevention of maltreatment and unnecessary foster care placement, and foster care as a support to families, not as a substitute for parents.
Parents that achieve reunification have often overcome great odds, and too often without the adequate support that they need. Their achievements are a demonstration of parental love and its ability to propel change. Reunification Month is also a time to challenge ourselves to reduce the unnecessary removal of children from their families and to remind ourselves of the critical importance and benefit of investing in families before harm occurs and before separation becomes necessary. The road for too many parents is incredibly arduous. We fall short of providing parents with the services that match their specific needs in ways that are easy to access and effective. We ask parents to do an awful lot, sometimes too much, given all that they may be confronting and the real possibility that they may be struggling with their own personal history of trauma. Responding to these situations requires us to reflect on our values as a profession, as a system, and even as a society, and to seek and create the kinds of community-based environments where families can receive the supports they need and be helped to avoid damaging crises. This June, we have an opportunity to imagine a child welfare system where fathers are supported and engaged as a rule, and where reunification is needed less because families are strong and intact and foster care is needed less. Let's demonstrate our commitment to fathers and to all parents by working together to build a system in child welfare that supports the conditions for all families to thrive, a system that is proactive, preventative, and allows all families to maximize their greatest potential. Thank you.
All right, and with that, I am going to introduce our National Foster Care Specialist, Taffy Compain. Taffy?
Thanks, Jennifer. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our National Reunification webinar, Fostering Relationships Through Visitation. My name is Taffy Compain, and I'm the National Foster Care Specialist at the Children's Bureau.
a screenshot of the Child Welfare Information Gateway's Reunification webpage. For more information on reunifying families, visit https://www.childwelfare.gov/topics/permanency/reunification and the website https://www.americanbar.org/groups/child_law/project-areas/nrd.html.
There are currently more than 430,000 children and youth in foster care across the country. And as you know, reunifying children with their parents and families of origin is a fundamental component of the foster care system. As of the latest AFCARS report, that is the Adoption and Foster Care Analysis and Reporting System, 55% of children and youth in foster care have a case plan goal of reunify with parent or principal caretaker, with the majority entering foster care for reasons of neglect at 61%, followed by parents' drug abuse at 34%. In addition, 51% of the children exiting care during this time did so to be reunified with their parents or with primary caretakers. As our Associate Commissioner Jerry Milner often reminds us, foster care should serve as a support to families, not a substitute for the parents. Being that reunification is such a critical function in child welfare and core to our vision and priorities, the Children's Bureau and the Administration for Children and Families under the Department of Health and Human Services would like to acknowledge and to express our gratitude to the many agencies, organizations, and the individuals that help in this very important work. I would take a moment to point you to several reunification-specific resources that we provide and also some of our partners provide. And we're providing this through the Child Welfare Information Gateway. Some of the resources that we have, which I think is really critical, include actual state and local examples of their resources, their tools, and their products related to reunification, which are helpful both to child welfare practitioners and also to other stakeholders, caregivers, biological families, etc. We hope that you're able to review these after the webinar as well. So we've decided that for this webinar, we want to focus on visitation as one of the key components of supporting reunification. And in particular, we're excited to bring you a deeper look into two programs that focus on building positive and supportive relationships between the birth parents and the foster parents. So we have an interactive and informative webinar for you today, and I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to move us forward and tell you more about the programs and to begin our presentations. I thank you kindly for making the time to be with us today, and I sincerely hope that the information in your is useful in your work. Whatever role it is that you play in child welfare, we do sincerely appreciate your time and your dedication. Jennifer?
Thank you, Taffy.
Sure.
All right, so as we move forward into the presentation, I just wanted to quickly run through the objectives for today's webinar, and they are identify approaches to improve visitation between children and parents, be able to recognize best practice examples and visitation programs, and identify strategies that support partnerships between caregivers and birth parents. So with that, let's get into it. I'm going to turn it over to Jenny from St. A.
Thank you, Jennifer. As Jennifer mentioned, I am Jenny Keefe from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I oversee the Family Preservation Program here at St. A. Our Family Preservation Program follows St. A's mission, which is to facilitate equity, learning, healing, and wellness by restoring the connections that help children and families thrive. We provide care for families in order to prevent removals of children and also to support families towards reunification if the family has been separated. Before diving into the specifics of the care that we provide in our program, I wanted to share a bit about St. A at large. Our former name, St. Emilion, started as an orphanage responding to the needs of children during Milwaukee's cholera epidemic 168 years ago. Today, St. A has moved from being responsive to providing preventative care, including early interventions for childhood trauma. Trauma-informed care is woven into our school and all of our programs, which include foster care, reunification, adoption, youth programs, our outpatient mental health clinic, and of course, my family preservation program. In addition, SANE has trained nearly 75,000 people in trauma-informed care. We are one of only 9 agencies in the world with NMT flagship status from the Child Trauma Academy, which was founded by Dr. Bruce Perry, who is our mentor and friend. NMT is the neurosequential model of therapeutics, which is a developmentally informed and biologically respectful approach to working with children and adults. Dr. Perry, SANE, one of our clients and her family were actually recently featured on 60 Minutes with the one and only special correspondent, Oprah Winfrey. Based on what we have learned from Dr. Perry over the years and how healthy brain development follows a sequential pattern, SANE has developed our trauma-informed framework, which is called the 7 Essential Ingredients of Trauma-Informed Care, which we commonly call the 7EI. We provide trainings on the 7EI, and they range from a full day to several days long, so I won't be elaborating too much on the meaning of each ingredient. Instead, today we'll be emphasizing the importance of our 5th ingredient, which is relationships.
Saint A's 7 essential ingredients of trauma-informed care include prevalence, impact, perspective shift, regulation, relationship, reason to be, and caregiver capacity.
Dr. Perry's work has taught us that healing and resiliency is built through a strong relational framework. In other words, children become more resilient to trauma when they have consistent, healthy interactions and strong, healthy relationships. Relationships are really key to reaching a traumatized person and to mitigating trauma that they may have experienced. To put it plainly, strong relationships shield a child from the effects of trauma. We know that healthy relationships can help to build healthy attachments for children. During infancy and early childhood, we are biologically predisposed to form attachments to caregivers. This is defined as a child's tendency to seek comfort, support, nurturance, and protection from at least one caregiver. Children may have a different attachment with different caregivers depending on the kinds of experiences that they've had with those caregivers. And through consistent experiences with caregivers, the young child develops expectations about the dependability of attachment figures to support and protect them in a time of need. For children in foster care who are at a higher risk for developing unhealthy attachments, it is important to facilitate secure attachments to foster parents before then transitioning to facilitating attachments with families of origin before reunification. Our family preservation program facilitates care for families to prevent out-of-home care or foster care, but a good percentage of our families have children in out-of-home care or foster care. In order to aid in developing healthy relationships and experiences for children while they are out of home, we focus a lot of our time on strengthening the relationship between foster parents and birth parents. We encourage foster or kinship parents, so relatives, to be involved in the family time with the birth family. So we call our supervised visitation family time. So I'll be referencing family time, but that is what some people know as supervised visitation. So we encourage the foster or family members, and sometimes even a friend or potentially even somebody from church, whatever the safe person that's identified to be part of the family time, we encourage them to provide support and comfort to the child. This is also a very natural way for foster and birth families to connect with each other. When you think of how you develop relationships with a colleague or a friend, you probably think about a commonality that you share together. Visits together with foster and birth parents are that common interaction that bonds them together with the, the invaluable benefit of creating a space for children to feel safe and ensure their needs are being met. When we do this, we see children that are less stressed and less confused, and we see long-lasting relationships between foster and birth families. And we see less stressful placement transitions when children are able to return home. All right, so we're going to ask you to share on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not at all and 5 being a perfect match, how much support do you have at your agency to provide trauma-informed visitation? So the polls are split quite a bit, but there is a handful that are closer to the middle and some that have said none at all. So for those of you that are closer to 1, I would encourage you to take a look at the resources pod for our webinar today, and you'll find some information that can guide you in developing your own trauma-informed program. Or you can reach out to the Quality Parenting Initiative at the Youth Law Center to seek more consultation on enhancing the co-parenting between foster and birth families. And we've also attached a description of our 7 essential ingredients of trauma-informed care, which provides you with more context to why each ingredient is vital in providing a comprehensive treatment plan for families.
Final polling results. How much support do you have at your agency to provide trauma-informed visitation? On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 represents none at all and 5 represents excellent, 7.91% answered 1, 23.7% answered 2, 27.3% answered 3, 21.5% answered 4, and 19.4% answered 5.
So in order to be successful in implementing more trauma-informed visitation at St. A., we needed to start by recognizing that traditional visits can be very stressful for families, even as they are nearing reunification. We define traditional visits as visits where foster or kinship caregivers aren't involved in the family time and there is minimal coaching for the birth parents. These visits often cause a lot of confusion for children, especially initially after being separated from their family of origin. We also often see birth parents that are hurt when their children are appearing cautious to see them, and children can become confused when they have inconsistent parenting practices between foster and birth parents if they are not communicating about routines and the general care for the children. But fortunately, we found that having the attachment caregiver present during the visit time can significantly reduce stress for children in addition to creating a less stressful environment for birth parents.
Trauma and cortisol regulation. The slide shows that childhood adversity is associated with reduced wake-up cortisol levels.
St. A. has worked with the Quality Parenting Initiative through the Youth Law Center to identify a process for creating more purposeful and high-quality visits that help families reach reunification. QPI directed us to the Attachment Biobehavioral Catch-up Visitation, or more recently known as the Fostering Relationships Model through the University of Delaware. It is now often called Fostering Relationships because that's a little bit easier to roll off the tongue than Attachment Biobehavioral Catch-up Visitation. But it also emphasizes the importance of fostering a relationship between birth parents and foster or kinship caregivers. Dr. Mary Dozier and her colleagues in Delaware researched wake-up cortisol levels for children who experience adversity and found the results that I'll be sharing in a bit. But first, a little bit of a biology lesson for all of us social workers. To put it as simply as possible, cortisol is a hormone that is produced as a response to stress. It is produced in part by the adrenal glands when we're under pressure and perceive a threat. The pituitary gland determines how much of the cortisol hormone the adrenals should release to help us fight or flee. In humans, cortisol also follows a diurnal pattern, which is the opposite of nocturnal. This means that a healthy cortisol cycle would look like the graph here. You'd have a peak in the early morning, and this morning spike is the body's way of helping us to rise and be alert as we wake up. Then you can see from this graph that we should have cortisol reaching its lowest levels at night, allowing us to fall asleep easily and to stay asleep. Here we see a graph on cortisol production patterns in young children living with their parents in home versus children placed in foster care.
Early adversity and cortisol slide. A graph is shown and depicts data as follows. Low-risk children's transformed cortisol value registered -0.5 upon waking and dropped to -1.2 by bedtime. CPS-involved children placed in foster care registered transformed cortisol values of -0.7 upon waking and -1.1 at bedtime. CPS-involved children who stayed with their birth parents registered cortisol levels of -0.8 upon waking and about -0.9 at bedtime.
Given that this is research that I wasn't involved in directly, I will be just sharing a more simplistic overview of this information. But one of the links in the research pod directs you to the link to the ABC intervention, which can provide you with more information on the research that involves measuring cortisol levels for children that were in home, in foster care, and children that had a low risk of experiencing adversity.
The link in the resource pod is http://www.abcintervention.org.
You can see that the line for low risk on this graph has a typical diurnal cortisol pattern, and even with being placed out of home, the square line indicates that children in foster care had less regulated cortisol levels. The next extreme is the children that had CPS involvement and remained in home. Normal cortisol levels are critical for maintaining steady energy throughout the day and to respond to stress appropriately. After implementing the concepts that we teach within the ABCV or Fostering Relationships model, which include encouraging parents to allow children to lead their playtime and to have the attachment caregiver in the room during their playtime, they measured the cortisol levels of the children in the implementation group and compared that to their control group, which was the group that didn't have those interventions. These children with the solid line showed that they returned to a typical or healthy cortisol regulation cycle. This is important because we often see children having spikes in their stress levels at night and disrupted sleep patterns, which is an impact of the trauma that they've experienced. We know from Dr. Perry that healthy relational interactions build resiliency, so creating meaningful and healing family time can help to regulate stress for children that experience adversity. And my own observation has been that it does the same for our birth parents. And now Chris will take us to our next poll, where we ask, what barriers do you anticipate finding with involving foster parents in visitations? We have quite a few coming in, but there's some themes where safety concern, I think, was a big one. Resistance from foster parents and foster parents feeling vulnerable or uncomfortable or just unwilling, and having disagreements between foster parents and birth parents, or the scheduling barriers. That's a big one that I'm seeing. Just feeling generally uncomfortable, or foster parents avoiding this because they're fearful of the birth parent and the stigma of the birth parents. And kids feeling torn between the foster and birth parents is one of the things you anticipate being a barrier. So I don't see many more people coming in, but there was a pretty good theme across the board of fear of the foster parent, stigma of birth parents, and confidentiality issues and scheduling barriers. I'm going to share some of the barriers that we've experienced and how we overcame some of them. So you can see here that a lot of the barriers that you mentioned are some of the barriers that we've seen and that we've been able to overcome since we started this implementation a couple years ago. So we have had hesitation from birth, foster, and kinship families, and we overcome this by focusing on new foster parents when they're just joining our agency and just starting their licensing process. And we're presenting shared parenting as an expectation. And oftentimes, once foster parents meet with birth parents, the birth parents feel less hesitant and they feel less judged. We also have assigned a family preservation specialist to work directly with birth parents in order to assist them with care outside of their visits. And this support ranges from discussing how their own trauma history impacts their parenting and to helping with securing housing and employment or accessing alcohol and drug addiction services or domestic violence services. Having this support person assigned assists both the birth parents and foster parents by allowing them to focus on connecting with each other, while the family preservation specialist can be leaned on when outside support is needed. And they can also dispel some of the judgments that foster parents have about birth parents and birth parents have about foster parents. This certainly doesn't come without scheduling conflicts, though, and that's something that people mentioned quite a bit in our poll. But we have found that once a professional no longer needs to be involved to support the family time process, then families are able to schedule their time together without our involvement, which is typically a lot easier for them. We initially had hesitation from court due to having less documentation of the family time, but we've overcome this by providing more documentation of team meetings and also providing summaries of the family time when we are able to be present. And for high-risk families, the families that you mentioned might be more violent or more hostile or foster parents might be more fearful of, we do not encourage full implementation with families until we've done our own assessment of the family and determined that they are engaged in this process and that they are going to be receptive to communicating with the birth parent and safe during their time. So we help to stabilize families and connect them to more intensive support before moving forward with foster parents being involved with the family time. We've also become really creative in how we offer training for foster parents because this is an additional ask for them. We're combining trainings in order to incorporate our 7 essential ingredients training into our shared parenting trainings, which helps us to limit the amount of training required and provides a consistent message to our families. We've also moved towards providing more virtual trainings, which helps to get foster parents their training in a more timely manner. Finally, we found initial barriers with the Fostering Relationships Model, or ABCV, restricting the implementation to children under 5 years old because that's what the research was based on. But we've enhanced the implementation to use the same concepts with older children, and we found great success. We continue overcoming barriers and being flexible and innovative with the process of involving foster parents and relatives in family time because we see time and time again that when we foster these relationships, we see children heal and parents are able to thrive. So now I'm going to turn it over to Katie Luciani from Sonoma County, and then we'll all come back together to take questions at the end.
Hi, this is Katie with the Sonoma County Parent Partnership. We started our partnership in Sonoma County in September 2017. Robin, one of our team members, is who's going to talk later, introduced the idea of forming a parent partnership on the local level after her involvement with the National Parent Partnership, which she will mention later. Today we are going to talk about the work we are doing in our county within our partnership. Each of our members are going to introduce themselves. I am Katie Luciani. I am the Parent Mentor Program Manager, and I supervise the program under Child Parent Institute, which is a parent support agency. Our parent mentors support birth parents who are in the child welfare system, having been involved in the system themselves and successfully reunified.
My name is Rose Esche, and my role is a supportive team member and a liaison with the county.
My name is Jody Rogers, and I am a parent mentor with Child Parent Institute.
and I'm going to give a little background about how I became a mentor. So about 5 years ago, I was addicted to drugs, and I was in a very unhealthy marriage. My children were witnessing a ridiculous amount of domestic violence, and that is when CPS stepped into our lives and removed my children. I had hit my rock bottom, and from there I just hit the ground running. I worked hard to reunify with my children, and I can honestly tell you that child welfare not only saved my life, but my children's childhood as well. I remember at my last court hearing when the judge asked if I wanted to say anything, what I had to say was, I looked at him and I said, someday I want to come back and I want to help people going through the same system, and I want to walk them through this. And today, that's exactly what I get to do.
Thank you, Jody. This is Robin Robbins, and I've been a foster parent in Sonoma County, California for 15 years, where my husband and I have specialized in caring for families with medically fragile infants. We've had more than 40 children come through our home, and last year I was privileged to be chosen to partner in the creation of a national birth and foster parent partnership. And the national partnership is the creation of 3 agencies: the Annie E. Casey Foundation, the Quality Parenting Initiative, QPI, which is a strategy of the Youth Law Center, also in California, and the National Alliance of Children's Trust and Prevention Funds. The National Alliance supports both the Birth Parent National Network, a group of amazing birth parent leaders, and the Birth and Foster Parent Partnership. So Jody actually brought this work to our local area along with me. After we experienced the convening last year, decided Sonoma County needed a parent partnership of its own.
So our mission as a partnership is to redefine family by creating partnerships between foster parents, birth parents, and social services in order to strengthen shared parenting and support the permanency of children. And I really like how Jody puts it, is just no matter which way this case goes, the child will have everyone in their life. So we are talking about permanency being that everyone who loves this child is able to be in this child's life as long as it is safe. And we believe creating partnerships allows this to happen because healing and change happens in relationships. Supporting partnerships and this newly defined permanency is beneficial for all members. And next we are going to talk about some of the benefits to all the parties.
So some of the benefits to our birth parents is, so right away, our birth parents are reassured in knowing right where their child is. The parent gains added support and guidance from the foster parent. They get to be feeling more like a team. The child feels less conflicted between birth parents and foster parents. Parents who feel more supported allow themselves to put their guard down and to begin to heal.
An additional benefit to the birth parents is that they are more likely to be successful.
So this is Robin, a foster parent, and one of the benefits to a foster parent is the one we all know, that at the very beginning of the situation, it's important for all parents to have information about the child's needs, what's been going on in their life, what they might need from the caregiver at the beginning of a case. It's really important. But partnership at that point really opens, as Jody said, it opens everybody's heart to each other. And the information is shared much more freely and much more important. So foster parents with partnership are lucky to have that possibility. Another very important benefit that I'm experiencing in this partnership is the diversity of what I'm able to do to support the family and what I'm able to ask for from the family to support the child. It's quite different than what I've experienced in the past. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the family we're involved in. And then another benefit to me personally is just I feel more listened to, and sometimes it's the birth family that's listening to me and understanding what's happening with the child in my care. And when we're listening to each other, then the child is going to have a much better experience.
And so this is Rose, and I was talking about the benefits for the child. And so one of the biggest benefits for the child is permanency, is creating that permanency. So during the time that the child is in care, the caregivers and the parents are working together on their behalf, and the parents end up having the support from the foster parents. They can get
ideas on how to work with the children. If the child is having issues with certain behaviors, then the foster parent can help the birth parent work through those. And then when the child returns home, they're more likely to stay there. So it creates for the child an extended family. And the foster parent and birth parent will share information. So with icebreakers, with pictures or journals, that children are benefiting from the communication between the foster parent and the birth parent instead of having a third party like the social worker give the information. And so it leaves nothing out. Reunification is more likely, as we know visitation is one of the key parts of reunification. And so when the parents feel supported in their journey, they're more likely to progress in their reunification. And this benefits the child because usually the best place for their child is with the family. Lastly, it strengthens the family. This is beneficial because when the child returns home, it makes it more likely that they will not return to care, as the foster parent can provide ongoing support in forms of babysitting, advice, etc.
A mother's story, a photo of a young woman holding a baby wearing Mickey Mouse ears.
So our parent partnership is productive, and Jody and Robin are going to be talking about one family story and how they supported their journey.
Okay, this is Robin, and we were lucky enough to be given the opportunity to work in partnership last fall with what we called a pilot family situation. We had some meetings ahead of time with folks at both the parent agency and at our local child welfare office to talk about what this might look like. But really, we were creating what is a grassroots project from scratch and making it up as we go with lots of support. And it's been an amazing experience. We're still right in the middle of this pilot family experience. But the first thing that happened was, as a foster parent, I was informed that there was an infant in the hospital that they wanted me to bring home. And then I'll let Jody talk about what happened next.
So I got the call from Robin, and she let me know that she had a baby. So we knew that our pilot family was a go. So I meet my parents at their detention hearing. So when I met this parent, I was able to not only just go there to engage with her and really connect with her and just be there as support, but for the first time, I was able to really share with a parent, I know where your child is, and I know that your child's in amazing hands. I personally know this foster parent, and she's very experienced with substance abuse exposed babies, and this mom felt so much comfort and so much ease to where she was able to take in the next step. She was able to say, okay, and just really put her guard down in that way and make the next step to do what she needed to do to get into a healthy situation.
So this is key here, and I see there's questions and comments about foster parents' fear and wanting to be anonymous, and sort of that's been the way of being for foster parents for a long time. But because Jody and I had a relationship as a birth parent and a foster parent, and she had spent that time with the birth parent before I met the birth parent, I felt much more comfortable knowing what the situation was going to be, who this mother was, what was going on in her case. I knew she was at a treatment center, and I knew that she was already open to having me be part of her life with this child. That took away all of my fear. It also put me in a place where I felt comfortable actually supervising the visits. So it was quite amazing what happened. We were all just open-hearted and available to work with each other. Before we even met, a relationship had begun because of Jody and her preparation. So I started right at the beginning being able to relate to this mom in a level as if we were family. And I know that what happened before the first visit had a lot to do with that. So, and because I was helping supervise the initial visits, I was also able to really teach her about what her baby needed and have her work with the baby in a way that was really beneficial, and everybody felt positive about the situation because of my comfort in being there. So yeah, my comfort was addressed by this partnership. And then this particular baby is medically fragile in many ways and has lots of needs for appointments and children's hospital visits and possible procedures. I want Jody to explain, because Mom was in a treatment center, she wasn't able to go with me to these appointments until Jody stepped in. So I called Jody and said, I have a problem, and she worked on it for me. Go ahead.
So when Robin had reached out, she expressed to me that she really feels Mom should be part of going to these doctor's appointments. So I was able to go into the treatment and to talk with the staff, and we were able to reach out to our child welfare and really all work together on how Mom could go with Robin and how she could be a part of her child's care and her child's healing. And with that, there's a healing process together, but it also has created a lot of learning moments for this mom where she's able to learn from Robin and how to care for the baby. So as things come up, we're able to pull together through communication as a team. We really try to all stay on the same page. So if this mom feels like she has reached a roadblock, oh no, I can't go, I can reach out and say, well, let's go talk to them together and work through this. And through that, she's really been able to be active in every step of the way through this little baby's process.
So one of the really valuable aspects for me in this teaming with Jody is when something comes up at a visit or with the baby or a concern I have about this birth parent and something that might be happening, I am able to talk to Jody about it. And I know that immediately she's going to be able to mentor this mother or find out what's going on and get back to me. And we're going to have a solution and a resolution quite quickly rather than the practice and policy of a child welfare department, which can take a lot longer. And we all trust each other. We have already built this relationship of trust. So things that come up and challenges that happen can be resolved much more easily. And so I just want to mention also where we are in this case, because it's very exciting work. And like I said, this is a grassroots sort of groundbreaking case in our county, but it's just going beautifully. And this mother came into child welfare having had 3 children removed and was not going to get services. And we convinced them that this mother who was being called hopeless deserved a little bit of hope, and we wanted her to be our pilot project. And now, I called her a project. She's a family. Now I have to tell you that I feel like I'm family with everybody involved, and we're in the middle of the case still, but I have been transporting this mom. We go together everywhere. I pick her up. I pick the baby up. We go to the doctor's appointments. If she needs a ride to her aftercare, I'm able to drop her off there. We have time in the car together. She helps me with the baby, and our relationship is just blossoming, and she's well on her way to reunification.
So now we've mentioned a lot of the strategies that were used throughout the story, but now we're going to talk about some of the specific strategies that they found most helpful.
So this is Jody, and I would say that the most helpful strategies we use is really open communication and trust. I really feel like from the very beginning, I build a very strong relationship of trust with the parents that I work for. And I think that's the most powerful natural strategy that can be used. And all of us communicating has been just huge. Even if it's about the little things, just really staying in communication on every little beat. I think it's helped us to eliminate a lot of barriers that have come in our way along the way.
Well, and the strategy of communication is number one, of course. I did notice a question, somebody asking me if I'm full-time foster care, because I work with infants. This is my full-time position, but I'm also involved in the pre-service training and as a foster parent mentor. And what I'm noticing is in this particular case with a baby that has a lot of needs, my time is much easier because I have this new support in partnership to help me through before, which would have been challenges that took a lot of my time and energy to come up with solutions. Strategy that I think is particularly new, it's just a new one I hadn't thought of before that Jody brought up for me, was the possibility of involving birth parents in all transitions for kids. So that was new for me. I hadn't thought about that before. I'm used to turning things over to child welfare to make decisions. So this is just going along beautifully, and we're learning more as we go along.
We are going to talk about other ways that partnership is strengthened. Our partnership is strengthened, as Jody and Robin have talked about, through our work with families, with our families. Other ways that it's strengthened is our involvement in the foster family training and the parent orientation. So child welfare in our county has collaborated with our parent support agency, Child Parent Institute, to provide pre-service trainings for foster parents, or resource parents is what we call them in California. And we also have a child welfare orientation for our birth parents. So both of these models include the participation of the other parent. So as a birth parent, Jody will attend the pre-service trainings for foster parents, where she tells her story and answers questions. Likewise, Robin, as a foster parent, will attend the birth parent orientation, where she talks with birth parents. So I'm going to invite both Robin and Jody to share their experience about going to both of these trainings.
Yes, so this is Jody, and I would say because I dealt with both kinship caregivers and foster caregivers, I have a pretty wide range of being able to relate to everybody in the room. But it's interesting how when I walk into the room and I'm speaking, I can feel the tension around me and just different vibes from everybody. And then I'm able to really share with everybody where I am today. And I also I get to share with them where I used to be and where I was and the journey that took me, and just everything I had to do walking through my own life and with child welfare to regain reunification with my kids. And it's interesting how from when I begin, it's very tense, and by the time I'm done sharing with all of these parents how hopeless my life was and where I am today, the shift of hope in the room, the shift from sort of being closed-minded to working closely with birth parents to open-minded, and they're full of questions. And interesting enough, by the time I leave or we go on break, they're reaching out, asking me questions, and I've gotten cards from different foster parents and things like that. People saying, thank you, you opened my eyes, there is hope. So I think it's amazing, and it's a huge thing that we're doing here in our county.
And this is Robin, and I'll share a little bit about my experience. It was one of my first experiences when I decided to open up to understanding more about the birth parent perspective. We have an orientation program for folks when they first come through the system. And during one of those classes, a foster parent and a social worker are invited to participate. And these are families that have just recently been traumatized by whatever was in their life before, and also the removal of their children. So there's a lot of high emotion in the room, and upset and anger. And so it's challenging to walk in there as a foster parent. We have a wonderful facilitator, and the agenda is well done. By the end of the hour, I'm just here to tell you that we've all turned into human beings. We sat in a room face-to-face long enough and talked about each other and what we do that the shift happens, similar to the one Jody experiences, where we're feeling more like we can be on the same team. So I would highly recommend that everybody come up with practice and policy that puts foster parents and birth parents in the same room face-to-face as much as possible with support.
So as part of this experience of the partnership and figuring out visits between birth families and the children and working with foster families, we've been starting a visit restructuring process, and it's been a long process because it's new. Like we've always had a certain way that visits are done, and so in trying to change that, we're bringing all the systems together. So we have what's called a family time work group, and we're bringing attorneys and families and courts and recovery center staff in to talk about how visits should look for a family. So we've been able to recently do that, and we're also working on visit coaching, where our visit monitors are actually coaching parents instead of just sitting in a corner writing down everything that the parent has done. They're saying now, you know, oh, I've noticed that the baby hasn't been changed in an hour. What do you think about checking on the diaper instead of just recording, Mom never changed the diaper during a visit. So it's been more strengths-based and more beneficial for the families and for the parents. Okay, next we have a polling question. So our polling question is, what are some ways you have strengthened partnership and engagement in your county or state?
And during that time, this is Robin, I just wanted to add to what Rose said about visit restructure. And it is a new practice in our county, but I have been in a lot of visits over 15 years, some more successful than others. And I just can't begin to share the experience of having the perspective of the birth family as shared by the birth parent mentor in my toolkit, understanding what they're going through, what their case plan involves, how much time they're needing to do the work on their case plan, and just that time of understanding where they're coming from, and the opportunity to also share what's going on in my life with them has changed the quality of the visits immensely. I can't even begin to share. So in our partnership, we've had that experience, and just to let you know that our intent is to share that experience with any way we can, particularly looking at court involvement. And in our meetings, we did have attorneys showing up at our visit restructure meeting. And as a foster parent, I'll just tell you, I was pretty shocked that even happened. It was incredible. But just a quick experience was yesterday. Yesterday was a court date for our pilot family. And because of how far we've come in this relationship, I had the baby and picked the mother up and took her to court and was there the whole time. And a judge saw us all together, and we all supported and shared at the same time and mentioned the partnership, and it was an amazing experience. So I'm going to hand it off to me.
Okay. Katie. So we're seeing a lot of the answers coming through. It looks like there's a lot of diversity in what people are doing. So there's some great ideas on there.
Polling question. What are some of the ways that you have strengthened partnership and engagement in your county or state? A few responses are as follows. Child and family team meetings. A communication book to share the child's life with both resource parents and birth parents. Hosting different events where collaboration can occur. Joining family events. Marketing at churches, playgroups, and my gym. Developing icebreakers. And co-parenting lunch and learns.
We are next going to talk about some of the barriers that were faced in working with the mother we mentioned, the family we mentioned earlier. A lot of the barriers I think were overcome, but I'm going to turn it over to Jody and Robin to talk about some of the barriers.
So the first one, this is Robin, that I was up against, and I think I've seen from some of your comments and some of the poll answers to the polling question. It's just the practice and policy that's in place already, and lacking new practice and policy in this very new, exciting way of partnership is a problem. So we're having to sort of make it up as we go, but it isn't that difficult once we start building relationship. And looking at all the information you just received from our last presenter, it's pretty clear that healing happens in relationship. So the lack of having done it before in Sonoma County was the first barrier we were up against, and now we have surpassed that barrier because now we have a model in place. And I think also the key for me is the mentorship program. So, and also looking at preventative strategies in the future and redefining the role of foster parents for family engagement and prevention. The mentorship role is key, and because of that, we need to look at ways of funding and resourcing mentorship on all areas. We have a small mentorship program in our county. We have 8 foster parent mentors and just a handful of birth parent mentors, but we also need relative and kinship care mentors. And if we get a robust program of mentors, we could work in partnership in the areas where we have just been trying this out. Barriers we've overcome.
I would say the biggest barrier that we had to try to overcome with this family was getting it off the ground and going. I would say that was a barrier. So just getting everybody on board for it. But once we had moved through that, I think it's just, I would say just keeping everybody on the same page. So something for me that I've noticed, you come into parenting differences, and that's just a reality. Parenting differences between bio parent, foster parent, and just just staying transparent and just continuing to communicate through that and being willing to listen. And other than that, I feel like it's been just an amazing experience. We've been really blessed with this family.
Additional barriers include stigma and fear of the unknown.
And I'm going to talk about some of the things that are working and what's not working. So one of the main things that's working is the AB 403 Continuum of Care Reform that is focusing more on kinship care and permanency for children. Partnerships like the one that we have and openness of people involved in the case. While we've had some issues, a lot of people are really becoming more open to working together with birth parents and foster parents. And as part of that, we're looking at revamping some of the systems in place. What hasn't been working is, of course, everybody's plight of there's not enough resources, and we do tend to have people still working in their own silos. Part of that being some parties are having a hard time with the change. So now we have another polling question, and that is, what ideas do you have that support partnership? If you want to go ahead and list some of those ideas, and we're kind of getting a little short on time, so we'll have to come back and address those. And so we'll go to the next.
Well, I want to share real quickly while you're doing this is a couple of the ideas that have organically happened because of our partnership. We've been working with other visit situations too where there's been an identified problem where the birth parent and the foster parent are not communicating. So our partnership goes in and talks to all of the parties involved and creates a new visit to address those particular issues. And we've had great success in three or four more families now that we've started our partnership. And then the other idea that I thought was really phenomenal that Jody had was to create a peer-mentored birth and foster parent support group on a different site. And I think we're going to make that happen. We're very close to having people show up and be able to talk to each other and just sort of see what happens and share perspectives and come up with a strong family strengths-based way of being in Sonoma County.
One of the ideas that I see coming up on the polling question is support groups, and that's something that we have for our future ideas.
Polling question: what ideas or needs do you have that support partnership? A few of the responses are as follows: support groups, communication, trust, the need of more staff, more training for foster parents, involvement in children's appointments, and communication about the child's needs.
Where we are really supporting shared parenting. So getting foster and birth parents in the same room and having a parenting support group as well is one of our future ideas. Having more court involvement, really having all parties at the table, and that's something that we've noticed in this county, that often attorneys want to be involved, but they're often not invited. And when they are invited, they're really excited to participate. And I'm not sure why that is overlooked, but that's something we've noticed, and we're really trying to be mindful of inviting all parties. And let's see, involvement. Resource family training for service. One thing that we've really gotten feedback from foster parents about is they really don't know the process of reunification. And they're really interested in knowing what the process is for birth parents. And once they know like all the services that they're obligated to do and everything that keeps them so busy, it really helps, I think, bring them on the same page in understanding their responsibilities and all the stressors, all the obligations that they're juggling. We really, a future idea and a need is that we need more mentors to do this work. Our partnership really relies heavily on the mentors. So that's something that we're looking into and a need that we have. And more foster family, not just foster family, but birth parent involvement as well. We can't do this work alone. Everyone needs to pitch in. So that's something that we're really working towards in our partnership is getting more involvement. And support for fathers. Fathers are often overlooked and often do want to be involved. So we're just really mindful of how we can incorporate foster parent fathers and birth fathers in our work.
Questions slide.
So
Our partnership is about healing and change happening through relationships. Even when our birth parents participate in services, it's often the relationships they build in those services that are the most powerful, not just the services themselves. When a birth parent and a foster parent are able to have a positive partnership, it is powerful for the child, the birth parent's process, and the foster parent as well. This is where redefining permanency comes in. Everyone in the child's life gets to stay in the child's life. And now we're going to turn it over to Jennifer for Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Sonoma County team and Jenny, for all that really, really great information. So we did have a lot of questions come throughout the webinar. So one, I think this should be just a quick one, Jenny. We had a question come in about the name of the site with the resource, and I think it might have been QPI, so I'm wondering if you could just let folks know that one.
QPIforkids.org is where you can find the Quality Parenting Initiative, but specifically about the ABCD model would be, I think it's abcintervention.com, but I would just encourage you to Google ABC for Visitation. You can find that through the QPI for Kids website as well.
Great. Thanks, Jenny. So this question came up when Sonoma was talking, but I think it could, Sonoma, you can respond, and then Jenny as well. The question came in about if you can talk about the success you've had with the model for older children, like over 14, who come into care, and what are the different challenges for birth parents and foster parents to work together with those older youth?
So that's a question for Sonoma, you're saying?
Yeah, I think and then Jenny also, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, so we've actually had a family that we got to work with where this mom had a child who got pretty close to the foster family and was feeling nervous with bio mom, so we were able to pull both families together and this child was able to see them work, like communicating and not being strangers anymore, like dropped off at the front door and then, picked up on the inside by the parent, where watching them communicate in a really healthy way together and work together made this child feel safe, like, okay, this is okay. So once they became not strangers anymore and they started working together, it made it one family for this child rather than two very separate families, and they both stopped at the door. It more became everybody. Like, it wasn't a choice for the child anymore. It was like, this is all of my family now. Like, this child gets everybody.
And often a child will feel split loyalty, so they'll really care for their foster family, and they love their bio parents. So it allows that child to have less anxiety during this process.
We had another question that came in about, I like the idea of meeting parents at detention hearings. Can you talk a bit more about other instances where you interact with birth parents, such as CFTs? It's a question for Sonoma.
Yeah, so this is Jody. I do meet the parents at their detention hearing. That's usually our first interaction. But we go to team meetings, team decision-making meetings as well. So usually we go through this process with the parents, and we're really at any appointment that we can possibly be at. We go to all of their court hearings. Even sometimes when they're really extremely nervous, meeting with their social worker, we can go there as support and kind of just try to help them understand, like, really what's going on. Because it seems like while this is happening to a parent, it's harder to process everything. It's harder to understand, like, what just happened. So being able to say, this is a good thing, or this is what we can do, because we really try to keep them in the solution and not just to sit in the problem. And we're able to really interact with our parents, like encouraging them, like, you should invite your foster family, like have them there, bring them in so they can see the hard work you're doing. And it just makes it a lot easier when you have all of these people and you're all on the same team in reality, which is Team Child, and everybody is just cheering you on and there in any way that they can be.
Great, thank you. Another question that came up actually a couple of times, maybe both of you can respond to, is there was lots of discussion about mothers, especially in the mother story, Sonoma, you talked about, but what about fathers? So how have you guys been engaging fathers and working with fathers, and have they been parts of these visits as well?
Yeah, this is Jenny, and I am back. We had phone issues, but our first success story actually was with a father. He, 2 years ago, we started our pilot. We were working with just early foster parents that were having a placement of just one child at a time. That's how we started this process, so that it was not overwhelming with multiple sibling groups at that time. And our first foster parent had a placement with a father that was not shy. He was actively in a relationship with the person that was the maltreater, but he was very resistant, actually, to starting a relationship with the foster parent. But after starting this relationship with the coaching of our family preservation specialists, it evolved quite quickly because they were able to connect with each other, and the foster parent was able to share her expertise in nursing, and Dad was able to really absorb that and started to look up to her. And we had them on a panel in front of about 100 people because Dad wasn't too shy and foster parent wasn't shy. They were able to share their story, and it was amazing because in front of everybody, Dad said that he loves the foster parent as if she's a grandma figure. And so that was our first success story, but we have found great success with fathers as long as we're intervening early and they're not feeling like they've been left out. The key is to make sure that we're connecting with them at the same time we're connecting with mothers, because if we're starting that disruption in our relationship with them early on, then they're not going to be as connected to this process. So we're treating them just as equally, and they are just as engaged if we're encouraging them to be involved.
Thank you, Jenny. Sonoma, do you guys have any thoughts about father engagement?
Yeah, so I feel like
So one thing we've noticed in our county is there aren't as many resources for fathers as mothers. So that's where the parent mentor position really, I think, comes in, is to help the fathers really advocate for themselves or look outside of the area for resources that are needed. I'm specifically thinking of like treatment centers. So that's one way we try to support fathers. But another thing is we've noticed that the system often overlooks fathers and really prioritizes the mother. So just helping support the father so that they are being heard as well. But we're trying to create our partnership is inclusive. So it's about including everyone, fathers, birth parents, foster parents, community partners, extended family. So, it's a natural part of our partnership is including the fathers.
Great, thank you. A question that just came in was around what is the best process to facilitate visitation for incarcerated parents that are in prison for long periods of time? Jenny or Sonoma, do either of you have any thoughts about that?
We have a different program in Milwaukee for supporting incarcerated parents. And with the ABCV, or Fostering Relationships, we want to make sure that we're connecting with parents before encouraging the foster parents and birth parents to connect. And because that program is separate from ours here at St. A, we have not engaged with families that are currently incarcerated.
So as I said before, this is a new paradigm for us in Sonoma County, but we're definitely looking at the possibilities widespread of our partnership supporting all situations. So in terms of incarcerated parents right now, foster parents don't have any contact with those folks. So we're looking at possibilities that might have to do with more contact between foster parents and biological parents who are incarcerated, and what that might look at. And we're talking to community partners, and what we intend to do is create a format where partnership is the beginning of the conversation and becomes practice and policy and hopefully systems change. So that would address that particular problem, but we're still looking at ways of how that's going to happen, and we're open to all of your input if you have great ideas.
Great, thank you guys. One of the questions since I'm facilitating, I'm going to throw in one of my questions. Just curious if you guys can talk about stakeholders that you need on your teams in order to get your programs, approved, piloted, implemented. Who do you have to have on board? How do you get that process started?
This is Jenny. I can share. So we actually, the great thing about Quality Parenting Initiative is that they, when you're using them for consultation, they help you to set up a community meeting to make sure that every stakeholder is invited and has some input in the process, the planning process for anything related to shared parenting. And so we had a community meeting 3 years ago that included judges, attorneys, people in state legislature, foster parents, birth parents, youth, anybody that was a person that worked in or was connected to child welfare was invited. We also invited our university that provides our training partnership. And from there is where we developed our goals for the Quality Parenting Initiative within Milwaukee. And one of those goals was to enhance our visitation or family time. And so we were able to identify key people from that community meeting that wanted to be part of this planning process for the visitation. And they were part of a work group that lasted for almost a year in order to create the processes for implementing this. Because we are in Milwaukee and we're more privatized, we have lots and lots of people that are connected to our child welfare system, and so we made sure that they were at least informed or invited to this planning process. And now we have to we continue to have meetings with anybody who's closely involved with each family, and we continue to have updates and meetings with the legal parties and our partners at the state so that they can be enhancing this with us. And we have QPM, or Quality Parenting Milwaukee is what we call it in Milwaukee. So we have a council, so a group that is identified as meeting on a quarterly basis to enhance our shared parenting policies, which include family time. And that has key people that are involved with communicating any updates and helping to plan to enhance things. Oh my.
So to add on to what Jenny was saying, and definitely in agreement with that, some of our stakeholders that we've been trying to invite to the table for our family time work group and also our partnership is everyone with the court, so including minors and parents' attorneys, the judge, our local recovery centers, getting more foster parents involved in the partnership, and birth parents when that seems like it's able to happen. Relatives, community partners, social workers, so anyone who touches the child's case or is in the life of the child needs to be involved in this partnership and making it grow.
And so this is Jody, and I want to kind of add to that the stakeholder that definitely helped our partnership, and actually me as a birth parent myself, was the National Alliance Birth Parent National Network. I want to say that they have really supported our partnership, And they're actually the reason that my mind changed and that I even myself as a birth parent became open to working with foster parents. I was really closed-minded to the entire idea. I was the one in the room that when somebody said, who in the room doesn't think this is going to work, my hand was the only hand up. I was very closed-minded to it. And so the National Alliance really opened my mind and my heart, and it's really the reason that I'm sitting here just all about our partnership today.
Great, thank you. It's really helpful to think about all the stakeholders you want to bring in, especially in the beginning. A question for Sonoma. How do you structure family time when the foster family has multiple children? So like biological children, adopted children, or fosters for more than one family?
So that is something that we continue to work on because it is hard when a foster parent does have multiple children in care, including their birth children. One of the things that we have been able to work out for a couple of our visits is either having a social worker assistant, so the visit monitor, maybe be in the room with the children who aren't a part of the case. And also we've had staff step up and help out. But one of the things that we're really moving towards is having the foster parent mentors come and help so that the foster parent can be in the room with the birth parent and the child, and the foster parent mentor can be out with the kids who are not involved in the case.
Great, thank you so much. And another question for you all too was, can you provide examples or strategies on how to bridge foster parents and birth parents when there are two parents? I know you talked a little bit about father engagement, but working with the foster parent and both parents.
So if I can clarify the question, are you asking how the mentors work with both both parents in the case?
Yeah, I think, they said foster parent. How does the foster parent work with both parents? So yeah, foster parent, mentor.
How do we work with the parents when there's more than one parent? I'm not sure I'm clear on the question, but if that's it, there's more than one parent in my foster home too. My husband is also available to work with families. So I'm not sure I'm answering the question though.
Sure, I think that it's about mother and so you're the foster parent, and then there's a mother and a father both involved in the case. And so how do you work with that?
This is Jenny. So
and it looks like
that.
Okay.
We have several families where there's a two-parent household for the household where the children were removed from, and the first success story I talked about was actually a great way for us to work out the kinks with that, because dad was more engaged, but he was having a healthy relationship and there was no domestic violence between him and mom, and so he helped with mom's resistance to this process, and she became involved a few months in, but that's not realistic for every family. There are some two-parent households that have active domestic violence, or they don't want to co-parent themselves, and so the way that we address that is by making sure that we're having the family preservation specialist connect with the family before we start the family time with the foster parents. If there are domestic violence concerns that are active, we're not going to put the parents together in the room. And so we'll have those family time scheduled separately. And a lot of our foster parents are comfortable with having those times separately, and that does work in their schedule as long as we're then taking some of the visitation time where we're facilitating some of that time. So we do get really creative where we're doing some of the visits or the family time, and the foster parents are as well, so that there isn't as much of a scheduling burden. But if there's differences in parenting styles, we're continuing to coach all the parents, foster parents included, to make sure everybody's on the same page. And that's why it is pretty crucial to have somebody assigned that is part of the child welfare process, so that we have our family preservation specialists that can be there to make sure that everybody's being coached to be on the same page.
This is
Great,
Robin.
thank you, Jenny. And they did clarify that that's what they were talking about, is especially when there's domestic violence or some issue between the parents.
This is Robin from Sonoma County, and these are very important questions, and safety is number one for everybody involved. So definitely all of these practices need to be followed. But I just want to remind everybody that we are looking at a new way of thinking. We are looking at prevention and family engagement and shifting a large, well-entrenched paradigm of how to work with families in our country. So I'm going to encourage everybody to continue to challenge yourself to looking at new ways of letting things happen. And that's going to definitely need to be necessary in how we use pre-service and recruitment and retention for foster families, and really try to open people's minds to new ways of being with biological parents. And it's not easy. Change is never easy for any human beings, but it's necessary for the child. So we're thinking out of the box here in Sonoma County. We've had some fabulous results because we've been willing to take on that challenge. So in terms of working with the situations the way we have for many, many years, we may want to look at trying something new.
Great, thank you, you guys. Well, we have time maybe for a couple more questions. So there's a question about, can you talk about setting boundaries between the foster parent and birth parent while still developing the relationships?
Hi, this is Rose with Sonoma County. So one of the things that we have in the very beginning when a child comes into care is what's called an icebreaker, which we're working on changing that name. But basically, it's the meeting between the foster parent and the birth parent and the social workers in the room, and we talk about what are ways that we can build this relationship while still maintaining boundaries. So like one of the boundaries is that, especially in the very beginning, that a birth parent should not be asking the foster parent for money or rides or, you know, anything like that. Not that we're saying later on it's okay to ask for those things, but just really maintaining that the birth parent is there to be spending time with their children and building that relationship, and the foster parent is there to support that, but not outside of the purview of the child welfare worker who is, you know, who is holding the case. So one of the things that, another boundary that we might have is not to, for the birth parent, not to ask the foster parent for more visitations without first going through the child welfare worker. You know, down the line as visits become more open, then certainly we might have the foster parent take over some supervision, or we might have the foster parent and the birth parent work together on creating their own visits. But in the very beginning, as we're trying to navigate the case and what brought the child into care, you know, we do have those boundaries, but we do them as well for the relatives. As a relative is caring for a child, you know, we're letting them know this is a different situation now. And so, yes, you are still that person's sister or aunt or whatever, but because that child is in care, we do have to have certain boundaries in place.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to throw one final question to Jenny. There's a question that came in about the benefits to siblings and sibling connections for youth in care as it relates to your program.
So we do have in Milwaukee, and I think many other places have this issue as well, where siblings are separated, so they're placed in different homes, and this, having relatives or foster parents facilitating more natural family time helps them to stay connected, because then foster parents are connecting with each other, so then they can facilitate sibling time even if the birth parents are not involved, and they can make sure that that contact's maintained so that siblings don't feel like they aren't seeing each other often. But when we do have foster parents and birth parents where they're all placed in the same place, we see a huge enhancement with making sure that each child is having their needs met, because the focus of this model is to make sure you're following the lead of the children. And so if the birth parent or foster parents are focusing on the individual needs of the children, then they're not having to kind of fight for the attention of the foster parent or fight for the attention of the birth parent during their family time, because they're making sure that their needs are being met for a good portion of the time. And so then their relationship with each other is not disrupted.
Thank you, Jenny. All right, well, that brings us to the end of time. I know we didn't get to all of the questions, so we will gather those and work with the presenters to finish answering them and get that back out to you all. As a reminder, I know it seems like we had some issues with the evaluation, but that if you guys can please fill out the evaluation survey, and there's also the web links up there. There's also CEUs available for this webinar as well. If you're interested, please let us know. I just wanted to really thank Jenny and the entire Sonoma County team for all of the work that they put in to presenting this webinar for you all today and all the great information that they gave us. And thank you all for your participation today. So thank you.